And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Today's sea ice analysis showing the ice up here over the northern Bering Sea continuing to do a slow dissolve here. And that obviously will continue here for the foreseeable future. Still some shore-fast ice here along the Yukon Delta coast, north side of Nunivak Island, and more extensive up through this area. Anyway, moving on to tonight's forecast again. Strong winds, winter storm warning continues, St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula, and winter weather advisories for the Noatak Valley northwest coast, and eventually the western Arctic coast as snow and heavy wind continues in those areas. Dry with light winds over the central and eastern part of the state into the Gulf of Alaska, showers over the Panhandle. This system stays to the south and won't be a factor, just some scattered showers tomorrow for the southeast coast. Mostly sunny, dry over interior Alaska, again from Kenai Peninsula up to the Arctic coast, and still snow and wind here, at least to start the day off for the Seward Peninsula up to the Noatak Valley area's western Arctic coast. And this front weakening, but it still will produce periods of rain over the southwest interior up to about the Kuskokwim Mountains there. East of there, just variably cloudy skies, and again becoming mostly clear farther to the east. And then for Thursday, that front goes to pieces here over the northwest part of the state and the western interior with just some scattered showers, mostly cloudy skies. New low develops here in northeast Bristol Bay, periods of light rain there, possibly into southern Cook Inlet, maybe into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, definitely for Kodiak Island. Partly mostly sunny, eastern interior, south central Alaska with increasing clouds throughout the day here for Cook Inlet, and a dry, partly sunny day coming up for the southeast coast, hopefully. And for the coastal water forecast, southwesterlies 10 to 15 knots on the south coast, and kind of a northwest to southwest light wind condition for the central coast, and west at 10 for the north coast. Southeast at 10 for Lynn Canal, south winds 10 knots for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. And for the day on Thursday, Clarence Strait northwest 15 knots, south at 10 for Lynn Canal, northwest at 10 for Stevens Passage. And for the central and south coast here, northwest winds 20 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas. West winds 15 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas on the north coast. Prince William Sound in the North Gulf Coast and the Barren Islands for Wednesday. Light variable winds in all these areas at about 10 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas. Cook Inlet, south to southwest winds 15 knots with seas at 4 feet. And small craft advisories for Kamishak Bay for a south wind at 25 knots. And for Thursday, south to southeast breeze at 10 knots for Cook Inlet with 3 foot seas, southeast 15 for both Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, seas 3 to 4 feet there. Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, variable winds 10 or 10 to 15 knots. Kodiak Island for Wednesday, southwest winds 20 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas. Alaska Peninsula, south winds 20 to 25 knots. And Bristol Bay, southeast winds at 15 knots. And for the day Thursday, for the Alaska Peninsula, variable to southwest winds, 10 to 15 knots, southwest at 10 knots for Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island, winds mostly south at 15 knots, seas 3 to 5 feet. And out in the Aleutians for the Fox Islands tomorrow, west-southwest winds 20 knots, seas 7 to 12 feet there. Westerlies 20 to 25 knots from Matka Island all the way out to Shimia. And moving ahead to the outlook for Thursday, southwest winds, light now for the western Aleutians from the southwest at 10 to 15 knots, light variable winds for Adak and Atka, all the way over to the eastern Aleutians with seas running anywhere from 5 to 7 feet. And for the southwest coast here, south of Nunivak Island, south winds 30 knots tomorrow with 7 foot seas. Otherwise, gale warnings here for the Yukon Delta coast, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, south winds 35 knots, seas 6 to 7 feet. Southwest 30 knots for St. Matthew Island with 16 foot seas. Southwest at 20 for the Pribilofs with 16 foot seas. And for Thursday, winds drop off to 15 knots for the Pribilofs, right on up to the Kuskokwim Delta coast at 15 out of the southwest, 25 knot southwest wind St. Matthew Island, southwest 15 for the Yukon Delta coast, and 20 knot winds for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. Good gales here continue tomorrow for the Bering Strait and the Chukchi Sea. South to southeast winds 40 knots. Brisk wind advisory, so the central and western Arctic coast out of the southeast to 25. Much lighter for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, southeast 10 to 15 knots. And then east to south winds over here at 10 to 15 knots for Thursday. South winds coming down to 20 knots for the central coast, and still 25 knot southerly winds for the western Arctic coast, with actually brisk wind advisories covering the Chukchi Sea to the Bering Strait for southerlies at 25 to 30 knots.